I stood at the doorstep of my new house, heart pounding, not from excitement, but from fear they'd find out. The key trembled slightly in my hand before I pushed it into the lock. The click echoed louder than I expected, as if even the house itself was surprised I'd finally arrived. I stepped inside and shut the door behind me with a quiet finality, like sealing off a part of my life I didn't want to revisit. I dropped my bag on the floor and looked around. The place smelled like dust and forgotten wood, but it was mine. Old wooden floors creaked beneath my feet as I walked through each room, one by one, careful, silent. I paused in the living room, eyeing the window facing the street. Without thinking, I pulled the curtain closed. I hadn't told anyone. Not Mom, not Lindsay, not even Dad, though he probably wouldn't have cared enough to remember. I'd signed the paperwork with Mark, my lawyer, in total secrecy, using my savings account they didn't know existed. I gave him strict instructions not to link any mailing address, not even my name on public listings until the ownership transfer finalized. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. "Don't forget family dinner Sunday. Your sister's bringing her new boyfriend." I deleted the message without replying. I walked to the small bedroom and dropped onto the bare mattress I'd dragged in earlier. The room was bright with the late afternoon sun, the light softening the cracked plaster. I pulled out a manila envelope from my bag and opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper, edges frayed, colors faded. A crayon drawing, a house with blue shutters, a picket fence, and my name written in oversized, childish letters across the door. I'd drawn it when I was 10. Back when I still believed I'd grow up and have a space that no one else could take. Before I learned that in my family, nothing stayed yours for long. Back when Lindsay hadn't yet developed her talent for making what was mine hers, with a smile and a well-timed sob story. I tucked the drawing into the top drawer of my nightstand. Not the kitchen drawer, not the living room cabinet. Somewhere private. Safe. By evening, I had managed to hang curtains in the kitchen, line the drawers with cheap contact paper, and wipe down every dusty surface. I sat on the floor with a lukewarm cup of tea, my legs crossed, the silence thick and satisfying. I didn't miss the noise, the constant opinions, the guilt-laced advice, the comparisons. I pulled out my journal and opened to a fresh page. March 15th, 2023. They don't know I'm here. They don't even know this house exists. And maybe that's the point. I won't let anyone claim this one. It's mine. Mine alone. A noise broke the stillness. 3 sharp chimes. The doorbell. I froze. The cup slipped slightly from my hand, warm tea splashing onto the floor. I hadn't given the address to anyone. Not even Clara, and she was the only person I almost trusted. Another ring. I rose slowly, the floorboards under my feet betraying every step. The doorbell rang. She was startled. She had never told anyone this address. I opened the door, and there they were. Mom, Lindsay, uninvited. Helen stood on the front step in a pressed blouse and heels, her smile polished to perfection, as if this were a pleasant Sunday brunch and not a silent invasion. Beside her, Lindsay shifted her weight to one leg, arms folded, her eyes already scanning the entryway like a real estate agent appraising a fixer-upper. "Sweetheart," Helen said, stepping forward without waiting for an invitation. "We were in the neighborhood." I didn't move, but she brushed past me anyway, her perfume following like a ribbon of command. Lindsay rolled her eyes as if I were the rude one for hesitating. I stood frozen in the doorway for a second before slowly closing it behind them. My house, my safe space, had just been breached, and they acted like they owned the deed. The aroma of garlic and rosemary still hung in the air from the pasta I'd been making, but suddenly the kitchen felt small, claustrophobic. "Cozy," Helen said, peeking into the living room. She ran her fingers along the back of the sofa like she was testing the quality of fabric. Very quaint. Lindsay made a beeline for the hallway. "Which one's the kids' room?" she asked as she walked, not waiting for an answer. I followed her halfway but stopped short when I saw her open the door to the guest room. I haven't decided what to do with that room yet, I said. Oh. She gave me that smile. Sweet, sharp-edged. Well, you should think about repainting. The walls are too dark for kids. There are no kids, I said flatly. She ignored me, turning to inspect the closet. Back in the kitchen, Helen opened the fridge without asking. She pulled out a bottle of sparkling water and held it up. Imported? Someone's doing well. I reached for the bottle and took it from her hand with more force than necessary. Would you like some tap? Helen chuckled, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. Don't be so tense, Rachel. We're just here to see how you're doing. I'm fine, I said. You always say that? Helen replied, settling onto one of the kitchen chairs without waiting for an invitation. Even when you're obviously overwhelmed, you always needed help making adult decisions. We're just here to guide. I stared at her, something hot and sour rising in my throat. The implication burned, like I was a toddler in a play kitchen, pretending to be grown up. Lindsay reappeared, now holding my spice rack in her hands. This isn't anchored. It'll fall if a kid tugs it, she said casually. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, she added, You should fix that before we move in. Silence. My fingers tightened around the edge of the countertop. Excuse me? Lindsay didn't blink. She smiled at me. Smug, serene, rehearsed. You didn't think this was just your place, right? It was supposed to be just a lazy Sunday scroll, until I saw my own house listed online. For sale. I blinked, closed the app, reopened it. There it was again. My front porch, my rust-colored mailbox, the crooked azalea bush I hadn't gotten around to trimming. A full carousel of photos. The kitchen I'd cooked in last night. The living room still bearing the fold of my blanket on the armrest. The bedroom with its unmade sheets. I hadn't taken these pictures. And I sure as hell hadn't given anyone permission to post them. I clicked on the listing. The price was lower than what I'd paid. The description called it ideal for multi-generational families and mentioned move-in readiness pending minor upgrades. My heart thudded as I read the contact. Lindsay Bennett. I pushed my coffee aside and opened my laptop, fingers shaking as I typed a direct message to the listing agent. Short, firm, professional. I am the sole owner of this property. Please explain why it is listed without my authorization. The reply came within the hour. Hi, Rachel. Thank you for reaching out. My apologies for any confusion. The property was submitted for preliminary listing through an internal reference by Lindsay Bennett, whom we were told is your family's designated representative. If this is an error, we're happy to pause the listing pending further clarification. Designated representative. The words spun in my head like a roulette wheel slowing on bad news. I went to the filing cabinet I had wedged in my bedroom closet and yanked out the folder labeled Property, Sacramento House. It was still there. The deed, the transfer papers, my loan records, notarized and filed through Mark's office. But there, tucked behind the originals, was something new. A scanned form labeled Title Advisory Update for tax optimization, submitted a month ago, apparently by Helen. I flipped the page. Her signature was there. Underneath it, scribbled in blue ink, the words, Rachel to remain as technical title holder, pending family trust arrangement. My vision blurred. Family trust? There was no trust. I hadn't authorized any trust. My breath hitched and I dropped the file onto the floor, pages scattering like broken promises. My phone buzzed. Clara. Hey, just checking. Some strangers came to look at the house last week. I thought you were selling. They said they were sent by Lindsay. Looked pretty official. I stared at the screen. I hadn't told Clara, my closest friend and neighbor, because I wanted space. Now that silence felt like a wound I'd inflicted on myself. I printed the listing, every image, every false claim, and sat in the center of the living room, surrounded by glossy pictures of my own invaded life. The corners of the paper curled from the heat of the printer, or maybe from my grip. I whispered aloud to no one. They're trying to erase me from my own life. The phone buzzed again. Lindsay, stop digging. You're only making it worse. You're overreacting, Mom said. It's just paperwork. I stared at her across the dinner table, my dinner table, where she had placed the casserole dish like she owned the space. The scent of rosemary chicken filled the room, but it curdled in my stomach. This wasn't a meal. It was a setup. Lindsay sat to her right, swirling wine in a glass she hadn't asked to use, eyes narrowed, mouth curled into a familiar smirk. On the other side, Aunt Karen gave me a fleeting glance of sympathy before returning her attention to her plate, choosing silence like she always did. I had tried to remain composed. I had even cooked, set the table, lit a candle. A part of me, still raw, still foolish, hoped this might be a moment to speak openly, to get answers. What I got was betrayal wrapped in napkins and pleasantries. I saw the title update, I said, forcing my voice to stay even. I never signed off on any trust. I never authorized any listing. And yet, this house, my house, is apparently a group project now? Mom didn't flinch. It's not that dramatic, Rachel. You've always been intense. We're just planning ahead. No one's taking anything from you. That's not what Clara said when strangers came to view my home. I snapped. That's not what the real estate agent implied when they called Lindsay the point of contact. Lindsay sighed, like I was boring her. God, do you have to turn everything into a battle? We were trying to help. You've never made long-term decisions well. Remember college? Or when you moved to Portland and came crawling back? I felt the air in my lungs shrink. This isn't about the past. This is about now. About the fact that I finally did something for myself and you couldn't stand it. Helen's voice was soft, patronizing. You're the only one in the family who is not married, Rachel. This house isn't just yours. It represents stability. For everyone. For the nieces, for the future. Then buy your own stability, I said, my hands gripping the edge of the table. You all have jobs, resources. You didn't come here to celebrate with me. You came to invade. There was a pause. Sharp, cutting. Then Karen muttered, Rachel, maybe if you just listened. No, I said. I have. For years, I remembered the day Lindsay got her first car, all bright red and ribbon-wrapped, while I rode my bike in the rain, soaked and silent. I remembered how Mom said, your time will come. But it never did. The candle flickered as Helen leaned forward, placing her hand flat on the table. Her tone was gentle, almost mournful. Maybe it's time to reconsider who owns what. I need to know if they can take this from me, I told Mark, gripping the manila folder like it might vanish if I loosened my hold. My voice was steady, but my fingertips betrayed me, pressing the edge of the file so tightly the paper creased. Mark Taylor looked up from his reading glasses, adjusting them slightly before gesturing toward the chair across his desk. Sit, Rachel, and breathe. Let's go through this properly. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old leather, just like I remembered from my childhood, when Dad would bring me along to quick meetings. Back then, Mark always had a butterscotch in his drawer for me. Now he had something better. Answers. I took my seat, watching as he slowly unfolded the documents, reading each one with the care of a surgeon. The silence was thick, broken only by the hum of a ceiling fan and the occasional rustle of paper. After several minutes, Mark leaned back, clasping his hands on the desk. Well, someone's been creative. What does that mean? I asked, my nails digging into my palm. It means, he said, the title is still in your name, on record. But the family trust addendum filed last month? It was altered. The signature isn't yours. And I'd bet my license that the notary used wasn't present. I exhaled slowly, part relief, part disbelief. So they forged my name? Looks like it. Helen filed it using a tax exemption loophole. She assumed the family trust would go unnoticed if it piggybacked on your existing title. Smart. Dishonest. But smart. I passed him the rest of the file, page after page of bank transfers, scanned deeds, and old emails. I want a full investigation. Whatever it takes. Mark nodded. I'll start today. But if this goes to court, it'll get personal. These things always do. It's already personal, I said. There was a knock at the door. Mark glanced up. Come in. Clara stepped in, holding her phone like it was a live grenade. Her eyes were wide. You need to see this. She handed the phone to me. The video opened mid-frame. Rachel's backyard, 7:12 p.m., time-stamped from 2 nights ago. Helen stood near the side gate, dressed in beige slacks and a silk scarf, gesturing toward the patio. 2 unfamiliar men in matching polos followed her through the yard, one holding what looked like a measuring tape. Here, Helen said in the clip. This is where the extension would go. Just keep it quiet. We're not ready to make it public yet. I felt something hot rise in my chest, anger mixed with humiliation. She was planning renovations for a house she didn't own. Mark watched in silence. Then he looked at me. If you want to fight, you'll need to trap them first. Legally. I didn't hesitate. My voice was calm, but something new crept in behind it. Resolve. Then let's build a trap. Quietly. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. And then justice. I stared at the fake email I was about to send, my finger hovering above the trackpad. The subject line read, Offer to repurchase house for twice original value. I drafted it to look like it came from a private equity firm, a firm that didn't exist. But the bait was irresistible, especially to someone like Helen. Mark had warned me just a week ago, over lukewarm tea in his dusty office. If they think you're weak, they'll move fast. He wasn't wrong. They'd walked through my home, rearranged my future, and tried to wipe me off the deed like a smudge. That kind of arrogance needed a mirror. I was about to hold it up to them. I pressed send. An hour earlier, Clara and I had installed a small camera inside the living room bookshelf, just between the old encyclopedias and a decorative bowl no one touched. Clara made it look like a cracked piece of molding, hidden beneath a sliver of tape she painted to match the shelf. This model saves to the cloud, she said, patting the frame. They won't know they're starring in their own downfall. The hardest part wasn't the tech. It was pretending nothing had changed. That I was still the naive Rachel who let them inside the house without hesitation. So I brewed herbal tea, left the hallway light on, and placed Helen's favorite brand of cookies on the kitchen counter. Bait, wrapped in familiarity. Later that day, I returned to Mark's office. He greeted me with a stack of papers. Emergency injunction, he said. Sign here, here, and here. This freezes any title transfers until we have a court date. And that stops them? It buys us time, he replied, and signals that you're no longer passive. The pen felt heavier than usual as I signed. Not because of fear, but because I knew I wouldn't get another chance to take this step. This was the shift. From daughter to claimant. That night, Helen and Lindsay showed up. Clara texted me when their car pulled into the driveway. I was watching remotely through the app, my hands trembling. Not from fear this time, but from anticipation. They didn't knock. Helen walked in, purse slung over her shoulder like she was still queen of someone else's castle. Lindsay followed, tapping something into her phone. She hasn't replied, Lindsay said. Helen opened the fridge, frowned. She's either bluffing or getting help. Either way, we need to push the paperwork faster. Then Lindsay said it. Leaning against the counter, arms crossed, her voice low but clear. If Rachel signs anything else, we're done for. I froze. There it was. Confirmation. My phone buzzed. Mark's text. This footage might be admissible, but we'll need more. You really should sell before you lose value, Mom said casually, sipping tea in my kitchen. Her words floated through the stillness like perfume. Sweet, rehearsed, hiding something rotten underneath. I watched the steam rise from her porcelain cup. It matched the practiced curl of her lips, the kind she wore when she thought she had the upper hand. She leaned back in the chair like she belonged here. She didn't. I stirred my tea, careful not to spill. The smartwatch on my wrist vibrated once, recording, live. I tilted it slightly, the mic facing her. "Do you think," I asked softly, as if I were genuinely curious, "if the house appreciates in 5 years, who would benefit most?" Helen didn't even pause. "Lindsay and the kids, of course. This neighborhood is ripe for a boom. That's why we moved quickly." "We." I blinked slowly, pretending not to notice the slip. My fingers traced the rim of my cup. From outside, parked in Clara's car across the street, a faint buzz filled my earpiece. She was on the line, listening in real time. Her voice was a whisper behind mine. "Stay neutral. Let her talk." Helen crossed her legs, brushing imaginary lint off her slacks. "Don't get me wrong, Rachel. It's good that you took initiative. But you've always, you know, needed a bit more guidance." "You think I'm not ready?" I asked. "Oh, sweetie," she said, reaching to pat my hand. I pulled it back. "You're not built for ownership. You were always the bridge, the one who softened things. You made it easier for others to succeed." The words didn't sting. Not anymore. I sipped my tea. "That's why we didn't tell you at first," she continued. "We thought if the papers came from me, it'd feel more efficient. You wouldn't worry over the fine print." My pulse was calm, my tone calmer. "Like when you changed the utilities without asking?" She chuckled. "You noticed that?" "I thought it'd help you. Less hassle for you to figure things out." There it was again, that wrapping of dominance in the guise of help. She believed I was still the girl who needed her to explain credit scores and gas bills. That was her biggest mistake. From my wrist, Clara whispered again, "Got it." That line alone, damning. I leaned back, finally smiling, just a little. "The bridge, huh? Funny how bridges can carry weight you never see coming." They found the camera. Rachel's fingers trembled slightly as she stared at Lindsay standing in her living room, one hand on her hip, the other pointing toward the wall socket. "Why is there a strange electronic device in the power outlet?" her sister asked, voice clipped, eyes glittering with suspicion. Rachel blinked, her mind racing. I don't know. Maybe something left from the previous owner?" she said, voice carefully neutral. Lindsay gave a tight, humorless smile. "You should probably be more careful, Rachel. This place might be more wired than you think." Rachel forced a laugh, brushing her hair behind her ear. Her heart was beating too loudly. She glanced at the man standing behind Lindsay, tall, in a perfectly fitted suit, and observing her with a kind of dispassionate precision that made her skin crawl. "This is Mr. Kessler," Lindsay said casually. "Mother's attorney. He was just curious to see the property." Rachel arched an eyebrow. "Curious?" "He handles family asset reviews," Lindsay replied. "You know how Mom is. Always meticulous." Mr. Kessler stepped forward and handed her a cream-colored business card. "In case you need legal guidance, I find it helpful to talk before misunderstandings become legal entanglements." Rachel took the card and stared at it. He was a lawyer, all right. But his presence here wasn't about clarity. It was a warning. They didn't stay long. A 10-minute drop-in that felt like an interrogation. As the door clicked shut behind them, Rachel exhaled hard and locked the bolt. She grabbed her phone and paced the room. The device? They'd seen it. Not even the real camera, just the decoy. But even that had been enough. She tapped open the hidden app Clara had installed. No recording, no audio. They must have checked it before she'd turned it on. Mark's words echoed in her memory. "If they realize you're planning something, they'll escalate." She walked to the mailbox, still jittery, needing air. Inside, amidst flyers and bills, was a thick envelope with a court header. Her hands froze. She tore it open. Inside, notice of filing. Petition for division of joint assets. Filed by Helen as representative guardian of shared estate properties under Family Trust Clause, Section 4.2. Rachel sat on the front step, her knees buckling slightly. They had gone to court, before her, before she could finish her side of the preparation. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Mark's name flashed on the screen. She answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "They filed first," he said without greeting. "It's on." I sat in court, silent. Let them think I had nothing, that I was nothing. The walls of the small civil courtroom seemed to close in with every word Helen's lawyer spoke. Everything had been orchestrated down to the tiniest pause, each sentence landing with practiced precision. I could almost hear Helen rehearsing it with him, the way she used to rehearse her speeches to the school board back when I was 12, always needing to win. "She's currently occupying the residence at 847 Marigold Lane," the lawyer intoned, which, until recently, was under the shared family trust. My client, Ms. Helen Myers, asserts that this property was never meant to be permanently transferred. It was recorded temporarily under Rachel Myers' name during a restructuring process to reduce estate taxes. This can be corroborated. I didn't flinch. I simply watched. Helen sat across from me in her immaculate navy blazer, her face arranged in serene confidence. Lindsay was beside her, hair neatly pulled into a bun, wearing the soft cardigan of a woman eager to appear sympathetic. Her hand kept brushing her stomach, subtle but consistent, playing the mother angle. "Our concern," Helen's lawyer continued, "is that this property is not being used in line with its intended purpose. It was always meant as a family asset. Shelter for Lindsay and her 2 young children. Rachel, while family, was aware of this arrangement. We request a division of the asset or immediate return to shared use." Mark sat beside me, not in a suit, just a dark sweater and slacks. He didn't speak. He didn't even look up. He simply jotted notes in his leather-bound notebook. The judge occasionally glanced over at us, perhaps wondering why Rachel Myers, the woman being accused of squatting on family property, hadn't brought proper representation. I glanced at the judge's nameplate. Honorable. Lyle Granger, mid-60s, silver-haired, with a look that said he'd seen too many families implode in rooms like this. Then came the moment I expected. "Ms. Myers," the judge said, addressing me directly, "do you have any evidence at this time? Any receipts, deeds, documentation that proves you purchased this property independently?" I swallowed and shook my head slowly. "Not at this time, Your Honor." Helen's lips curled, barely. Lindsay's eyes glinted. Granger turned slightly. "Mr. Fletcher, are you here in any legal capacity?" Mark lifted his eyes. "I'm her advisor, not legal counsel. We're reviewing our material. No further comment." The judge frowned. "I see. Then I'll issue a standing order. Both parties have 14 calendar days to submit full and final documentation of ownership, including but not limited to financial transactions, communication records, and third-party validation. We will reconvene following that deadline." The gavel hit, a dull thud, but it echoed through my spine. As the courtroom emptied, I could feel Helen and Lindsay watching me, waiting to see if I'd crumble. I didn't give them the satisfaction. I collected my bag and walked slowly, deliberately toward the exit. Only when we reached the hallway did Mark lean over, voice just above a whisper. Time to pull out what they forgot existed. I'd kept the letter in a locked drawer for years. Maybe it was time to open it again. The brass key slipped into the drawer's lock with a quiet click, one I hadn't heard in almost a decade. The bottom drawer of my father's old desk had always been mine in name, but never in spirit. Until tonight. I knelt in silence, surrounded by shadows and silence, and pulled it open. The envelope was still there, yellowed at the corners, my name written in his unmistakable hand. Rachel, for when it matters most. I sat on the carpeted floor, legs folded, the weight of the paper like lead in my lap. My fingers hesitated. Not out of fear, but reverence. My father had given me this after his third hospital stay. I'd been 23, barely understanding how deeply unspoken things could shape a life. One day, he had said, they'll come for what's yours. You'll know when. Tonight was that day. I peeled the flap gently and unfolded the letter. His handwriting, a little shaky, was still strong enough to carry his voice through the page. If you're reading this, they've come for what's yours. I exhaled shakily, tears already prickling. I wanted to give you something without noise, without obligation. The others, they always needed help. You never asked. That's why I gave you the house fund. You earned peace, Rachel. I hope you find it. Taped to the second page was a copy of a signed document. Official, dated, notarized. A cash transfer made 6 months before his passing. A gift of $210,000. Purpose noted clearly. For Rachel Myers to purchase property of her choosing. No co-ownership, no trusteeship. He had protected me in silence. While they were scrambling for his name in estate documents, he had given me something untraceable unless you knew where to look. Something private, unchallengeable. I wiped my eyes and folded the papers carefully. This wasn't just sentiment. This was structure, proof. One they couldn't overwrite, redact, or explain away. By morning, I was in Mark's office, standing in front of his desk as he flipped through the pages, brows furrowed in concentration. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. When he reached the bottom of the notarization, he looked up, calmly, but with something fierce behind his eyes. This isn't just a letter, he said slowly. This is a notarized declaration of intent. We submit this with the bank records of the wire, the time-stamped escrow logs. They're done, Rachel. I didn't smile. Not yet. I only nodded. We go public, next week. I didn't need them to believe me. I just needed the judge to read what I brought. The courtroom smelled faintly of old carpet and fresh printer ink, an odd combination that somehow mirrored my state of mind. Old wounds about to meet new evidence. I adjusted the black suit jacket I had chosen carefully that morning, not for vanity, but armor. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't emotional. It was quiet authority. Helen and Lindsay were already seated at their table, murmuring in low tones to their attorney. Helen wore her signature pearl earrings, the ones she reserved for meetings she expected to win. Lindsay, pale but composed, clutched a soft pink folder against her chest like a lifeline. I saw her glance at me briefly, then away, quickly. The confidence she had oozed a week ago was gone. The bailiff called the room to order. Judge Granger entered, taking his seat with a practiced sigh that hinted at a long docket. Civil case 417, Myers versus Myers. Property ownership dispute. Counsel, proceed. Helen's lawyer stood. Your Honor, we reiterate our position that Ms. Rachel Myers is currently occupying a property that was not purchased with her own funds. The property in question was previously associated with the family trust. Ms. Myers has no verifiable record of payment. We request the court recognize the house as a shared family asset. I didn't look at him. I didn't look at Helen. Mark stood, just a beat after the opposing counsel finished. Your Honor, we have new material to submit, including documentation clarifying the origin of the property funds, a notarized statement of gift intent, and corroborating financial transactions from the late Mr. David Myers. He walked to the judge's bench, placing a thick binder gently on the wooden surface. Judge Granger raised an eyebrow. This wasn't included in the pretrial packet. No, Your Honor. It was only recently unsealed from the personal effects of the deceased. It includes a handwritten letter and notarized transfer document. The courtroom fell into a hush. Granger opened the binder and skimmed the first page. His brows pulled together. He flipped again, slower this time. Then again. 3 pages in, his fingers paused. The silence stretched. This document, he finally said, voice low but sharp, includes not only a statement of intent, but a legally notarized monetary transfer. Dated, signed, and witnessed. I will consider this very carefully. Helen's lawyer shifted in his seat. Your Honor, if I may. No interruptions. Mark sat down, and for the first time I allowed myself to exhale. From across the aisle, I heard a sharp whisper. It wasn't meant to carry, but it did. That letter was destroyed, or so I thought. Helen's voice. Cold, cracked, panicked. I hadn't planned to speak, but when Lindsay lied, I stood up. The courtroom was more crowded today. Reporters lined the back row, their pens twitching in anticipation, eyes gleaming with the possibility of a scandal dressed as a family dispute. Someone from the local news had a handheld camcorder, subtly pointed at the bench. My stomach twisted, but I kept my shoulders straight. Lindsay took the stand first. She wore light blue, soft and innocent, her voice laced with a rehearsed blend of sincerity and disappointment. My mother only helped Rachel buy the house temporarily, she said, her eyes fluttering just the right amount. It was never meant to be permanent. We thought we were protecting her from financial stress. Protecting. The word hung like smoke. I watched the judge scribble a note. Helen folded her arms, satisfied. Mark tapped his pen against his notebook, a warning rhythm I had come to recognize over the last few weeks. Then Lindsay added almost casually, we didn't expect Rachel to misunderstand. Or to try and take it away from the family. I felt something harden in my chest. Misunderstand? I didn't misunderstand. I'd been erased. Intentionally. Repeatedly. I rose to my feet. Your Honor, I said, my voice even, my pulse roaring. May I respond? Granger blinked. Ms. Myers, you're not required to testify today. I understand, but I believe the court deserves clarity. He nodded once. I stepped forward. The room felt smaller than it had 5 minutes ago. My hands didn't shake. I pulled a small USB drive from my pocket and passed it to the bailiff. This is an audio recording, I said, from an afternoon tea at my mother's house. She didn't know she was being recorded. The voice you will hear is hers. The judge gestured to the clerk. The file played through the speakers. Helen's voice crackled, unmistakable. Rachel doesn't deserve to own it. She's always been a child in a woman's coat. I only let her sign because I thought she'd mess up and we'd fix it later. A few gasps echoed from the media bench. Mark stood beside me now, offering the judge a printed copy of an old email. And this, he added, is a transfer confirmation from Mr. David Myers to his daughter dated 2 months before the house purchase. Subject line, this is your start, Rachel. Your house, your name. Lindsay paled. Judge Granger glanced at the document. Ms. Helen Myers, he said slowly, is it true that you once said Rachel didn't deserve to own property? Helen opened her mouth, then closed it. Her composure cracked. And then she did something no one expected. She cried. I was trying to protect my family, she whispered, voice breaking. But the room was already silent. Too silent. And no one looked at her the same way again. The judge didn't yell. He just looked disappointed. And that was worse. It had only been 36 hours since the courtroom fell silent, but the fallout was already everywhere. The local blog, Sacramento Sift, ran a headline in bold type. Mother sues daughter to seize house meant for her. What went wrong in the Myers family? It was clickbait, but it wasn't wrong. By noon, 3 other sites had picked it up. That evening, I watched the news from the edge of my couch, arms wrapped tightly around my knees as a blurry image of me walking into the courthouse played across the screen. Behind it, a reporter said, in a case that's sparking outrage across social media, Sacramento local Rachel Myers defends her right to a house her late father gifted to her against her own mother and sister. I muted the TV. No victory felt this quiet. Mark had warned me once on one of our late-night meetings. Sometimes public shame does more than legal loss. People lose their empires not in court, but on the evening news. He was right. Helen had built her image over decades. Polished speeches, charity galas, press photos with public officials. Her name was still on the board of the private foundation she helped create, though her title had long shifted to honorary. But when she walked up the front steps of that same building today, cameras trailing behind, the receptionist didn't open the door. Someone inside pulled the blinds. Lindsay, meanwhile, had gone radio silent. Until that night. My phone lit up with a message from a number I hadn't saved but still remembered by heart. Lindsay, I'm sorry. I didn't know it'd go this far. Mom told me to do it. I just thought we'd still be okay afterward. She added a second later. The kids saw the clip online. Ryan won't talk to me. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over a reply I couldn't write. Across the room, Clara leaned against my kitchen island, sipping tea. She hadn't said much since the verdict. Just sat with me, answered messages when I couldn't, kept the house from falling into quiet chaos. Now, she tilted her head. So, she asked gently, what will you do now that you've won? I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know. The backyard looked the same. But I was not the same woman who planted those trees. The air carried a faint bite of autumn, not yet cold, but no longer warm. Fallen leaves brushed across the porch like small reminders of time passing, of seasons turning. I stood on the cracked patio stones, hand wrapped around the rusted garden hose, and looked out at the place I once saw only as a refuge. Now, it was something more. Something earned. The trees had grown since I first planted them with Dad. Little saplings then, barely waist high. We had knelt in the dirt, our hands muddy, our laughter bouncing off the fence like it could ward off the world. Someday, he'd said, they'll give you shade when no one else will. I had forgotten that until now. Or maybe I'd buried it, like the roots beneath me. I watered them slowly, deliberately. No rush. No one here to barge in, to scoff or correct, to tell me how better it could be done. Just me, the trees, and the soft thud of water hitting earth. Clara was in the garage, humming faintly through the open window as she cleared out the last of the donation boxes. She wasn't just helping. This had become her weekend routine. Might as well turn this place into a lighthouse, she'd joked earlier, brushing dust from her sleeves. Plenty of women need somewhere to anchor. I wasn't sure I was ready to host others, but the thought no longer scared me. That, in itself, was something. As I tugged the hose toward the roses along the back fence, my eyes caught on the sign, half buried behind a pot of lavender. For rent. Faded. Crooked. A lie that had lingered too long. I yanked it out and leaned it against the wall. Then I opened the old paint bucket I'd found in the attic, stirred it until the pale beige came back to life, and started repainting the fence. Stroke by stroke, the peeling layers disappeared. Later, I sat on the back step with a cup of tea and opened an old photo album. My father's handwriting looped in the corner of a Polaroid, Rachel's first tree. I touched the paper gently. Not to remember the pain, but to anchor the healing. The sun dipped lower, casting golden lines across the patio. A soft knock on the side gate startled me. It was Mrs. Nguyen from next door, holding a bowl of something steaming. I heard the court thing went your way, she said, hesitant. I nodded. She handed me the bowl. Faux for strength, she smiled. And for peace. I always knew this house had a good soul. My throat tightened. Thank you, I managed. She left with a wave. I stood there for a while, the bowl warming my hands. That night, I logged into the women's forum I used to lurk on silently for years. I began typing a post titled, "When You Reclaim More Than Just a House." I wrote about silence, about betrayal, about fighting with papers and memory instead of fists, about how some things, when returned, aren't what they were, but something better. I paused at the end, then typed one last line. Maybe it's time others found shelter here too. And I meant it. I kept the judge's ruling in a frame, not for pride, but to never forget. It hung on the hallway wall now, beside an old photo of Dad holding a paintbrush, his white shirt stained with primer. The ruling wasn't large, just a single typed page, stamped and signed, but it was heavy with meaning. It wasn't about land or money. It was about being seen, heard, named. Outside, the air was soft with spring. The trial had ended weeks ago, but some mornings I still woke expecting another letter, another knock. Then I'd remember. It was over. The house was mine. Undeniably, irrevocably. Mark and Clara arrived around 5. Mark handed me a small gift bag with a mock-serious face. "Legal tradition," he said. "Victory plant." Inside was a tiny pot of lavender. "To remind you," Clara added with a grin, "you can grow anything now." We stood on the porch for a while, watching the light slip through the trees. "I filed the paperwork," I told them quietly. "For the Women's Support Center. Just a corner of the garage for now. A table, a printer, a phone," Mark nodded. "It'll be more than enough." Later, as they left, Clara turned back. From "they tried to take it" to "you gave it back to the world." That's a legacy, Rach. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just smiled. The yard was quieter after they left, but it wasn't lonely. The wind rustled the fence I'd repainted. A bird dipped down toward the small feeder I'd hung by the old lemon tree. Life went on, simply and fully, in a place once weighed down by fear. I made tea, then sat on the back step, unfolding Dad's letter one more time. I knew the words by heart, but still, something about seeing his handwriting grounded me. "Protect what's yours," he'd written, "and then let it protect others." A knock on the front gate startled me. A woman stood there, mid-30s, tired eyes but steady voice. "Hi," she said. "I was told you help people with property stuff, especially women trying to get out." I nodded. "Come in, we can talk." We sat at the kitchen table. She told me about a boyfriend who kept every bill in his name. A lease she didn't remember signing. A child she wanted to shield. I listened. I didn't offer answers I didn't have. Just a plan to find them. She left an hour later. Hopeful. Lighter. And I sat by the window, sipping the last of my tea. In the yard, 2 children, Clara's niece and her friend, ran across the grass, laughing. They played near the spot where Helen once stood, calculating how to cut the house in 2. I watched them quietly. This place had held silence once. Deep, punishing silence. But not anymore. I opened my diary, turned to a fresh page, and wrote, "This house once held silence. Now it holds truth." They tried to erase her from her own life, with forged documents, fake smiles, and courtroom manipulation. But in the end, they couldn't withstand the weight of truth wrapped in handwritten ink, or the silent strength of a woman who'd been pushed too far. Justice wasn't loud. It didn't arrive with sirens or applause. It came through quiet persistence, notarized evidence, and a woman who refused to be gaslit one more time. The same house that was once used as bait in a family trap became the courtroom where truth testified without speaking. No matter how long lies stand, truth always outlives them. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. Sometimes standing still and refusing to surrender is the most radical form of resistance. And when injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. In the end, it wasn't just about the house. It was about reclaiming voice, dignity, and the right to say, "This is mine." And for those still trapped in silence, her story stands as proof. Perhaps standing up today means you'll never again have to bow to injustice tomorrow. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to support more justice-driven narratives. Comment 1 if you felt deeply connected to Rachel's fight. Comment 2 if you think the ending could have gone further. We'd love to hear your thoughts and learn what justice means to you.